On this episode of AV Week, HETMA is going to AVIXA, CDW has experts, and Legrand does too. All that and more on AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is episode 602, The Expert's Expert. This is AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of all the news in the audio-visual world. I am your host, Brian Heidgergen. Tim is on cold medicine at home trying to recover from the late winter bug, so I get to sit in the host seat. Joining us this week is Iffat Chaudhry. She's the bid manager at Involve Visual Collaborations, founder of Diet AV and What If podcast, along with being on the AVIXA UK Women's Council Committee and the membership committee. How do you find the time?
I do a lot of juggling.
Welcome to the show. We are also joined by Will Baer, Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Crimson AV. Welcome, Will.
Hey, thank you. Great to be here.
And William Franklin, Event Technology Coordinator and President of Franklin DJ and Event Services. Welcome, Willie.
Yes, indeed. It is great to be here all. Good to see everyone.
Someday we should do this in person. That'd be a lot of fun. My first question, it has nothing to do with AV. It's just something I like to throw in there every once in a while. So when it comes to the seasons, we are in winter right now. So does winter end for you personally at the end of February, or do you follow the astrological calendar of December 21st to March 20th? Or are you a December to February for winter? When do you start saying it's spring?
I was going to say I'm a spring baby, so yeah, I'm a March baby, so it's, yeah.
The sooner the better.
It's March for me.
March is a great month. I have to agree. It is an outstanding month because March signals the time frame of which I must renew my annual fishing license with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. So the annual cycle wraps up. And for me, the end of February, beginning of March is the soundest signal for spring.
For sure. When you bring fishing in, that's definitely signal spring, I think. I'd probably say the same. I guess March 1st for me is spring. Seems to be when the weather typically is changing around here and it feels more like spring.
Although it's so cold here.
We're supposed to get either 10 inches of snow or a lot of rain this weekend. They haven't decided yet. So
One or the other.
We'll find out by Monday. So our first topic this week comes from an article we read in AV Network. The Higher Education Technology Manager Alliance has announced a partnership with, or actually a formal relationship with AVIXA. Now, I don't know if this means they're Facebook official or it was just the formal relationship. I found that was funny in the release. For those of you that don't know, HETMA is a community of higher ed tech managers. So it's people that work for our campuses and our colleges and universities, and it's a place for them to learn, share knowledge with each other about the similar struggles that they all encounter in those jobs. And having worked with higher ed for most of my career, there are some very specific challenges that they have on campus outside of what you would normally see with technology needs in more of a commercial or residential environment. You know how doctors make the worst patients? Sometimes I think instructors make the worst students, but we won't go there for that. So they're going to have a presence at InfoComm. They've got a booth. This is going to be in addition to their award-winning virtual summit that they have. And so this is a big step for them. So how important, my question, I guess, to start off with is, how important are these types of organizations for people that work in our industry, you know, that they're specific to their core, what they work on?
HETMA, I think, as a group and the power they have, because they are US wide, the coverage that they have And then the leverage in terms of buying power that group will have is really significant for the industry and for manufacturers and for anybody who wants to sell into that sector. So that this is significant. And getting a 20 by 20 booth, some of the people they're buying from won't have 20 by 20 booth in InfoComm, sorry. So it is significant. And I spent quite a bit of time with the HETMA group at ISC this year, and they're absolutely fantastic. They are knowledgeable, they are committed to their sector, and they're committed to negotiating on behalf of the wider group. Now, whether that means it's creating a bit of a silo in the industry, I don't know. I think that's the danger. When sometimes if people become too or too reliant on the group, maybe they're not stepping outside of that. If they're reliant on the group to decide, well, these are the approved manufacturers we're going to work with, or these are the products that we recommend, does it further down the line, is that a consideration that they'll have to probably address? But I think it's great. I saw quite a few of them doing their booth tours and really engaging. I think it will make manufacturers and others potentially step up because they'll want their business.
Well, and I think the scholarships are great too, because going to InfoComm even once in a while is not a small task financially, and especially for some of the community colleges and smaller groups. And I'm not saying that state funded or unlimited budgets, but for everybody, getting there at least once in a while can be eye-opening to what's out there and what's possible.
I agree. Iffat, I must say, you touched upon a word that triggered for me, and that was the whole notion of siloing. But to start off with, in response to the question of HETMA and AVIXA, personally, I think it's a powerful union. And I've always been a strong advocate for HETMA and organizations like it, because it's easy to become so specialized in what we do. I worked 38 years in the higher ed environment. When you become so specialized, there are times indeed you can become siloed, with your own level of expertise. So when you have that collective of people who do what you do and that shared experience, it allows you to establish better standards, better procedures. It brings forth a series of different lenses that you need to apply to the field. So as I think about the union of HETMA and AVIXA, that will only indeed enhance what we all work to achieve. And often having representation that lands in the ear hole of manufacturers is difficult enough as an individual. So as organizations with that level of buy-in and that leverage, as you said, is extremely powerful. And it's a wonderful combination of forces.
Sure. I was just thinking about it in terms of the show experience too for customers that are focused on higher ed. Typically I'm at trade shows as a vendor manufacturer exhibiting, but when I do go as a customer, and you go with a specific need or a challenge that you're trying to solve, especially at the large shows like an InfoComm can be spread out over multiple exhibit halls in Vegas. There and so many different verticals being represented, there's a lot to sort through. So I think having a HETMA there to help sort of focus your experience, it looks like they're going to do booth tours and guided walks and things like that. I think it'll lead to a better experience for some of the higher education, make them more efficient and better use of their time as opposed to wandering and looking, trying to find those specific needs on their own.
Well, and having always attended InfoComm as an integrator, what really opened my eyes, and this is partially to Will and William, but the first time I went with a client, and I wasn't with our group because we did booth tours together, and it was a bunch of engineers and sales managers, and our vision and interest is completely different as opposed to walking the floor with a client or an end user and them going, ooh, that's really cool. Let's go over and see what that is. And it's like, I've never even seen that. I haven't seen that either. The other struggle, and I think this is with a lot of industries, but when I was in sales, something I did was I got all of my colleges and together, whether they were state, community colleges, whatever, and I got them together once a year, and we did lunch as a group. And the first time they're like, what are we going to do? And I'm like, we're just going to talk about struggles. And this was back when the transition of how do we get rid of VCRs and DVD players in the classrooms. So it was a while ago, but watching that conversation of, well, how are you guys doing this? Or what do you do with the instructor that wants this? And
Sure.
it was really just for me as someone that's an insider to the industry, it was eye-opening to the things that they were struggling with and the commonalities that they had, regardless of what group that, what type of college or university they worked for. And that was pretty amazing for me. It made me a better person when I talked to other people that we were other end users, and educated me in a way.
Yeah.
And so I think getting them together and walking the floor, I would love to walk along with them and just be like, oh, okay, they're interested in that. I need to look into that and get better educated myself.
Reading through this, that, a lot of other probably vertical industry associations will be keeping an eye on how this goes. And I think it makes sense for a lot of other verticals to maybe try to partner in a similar way with AVIXA moving forward, to just kind of draw attention and focus onto, their manufacturers, their products, their industry, for sure.
Excellent. You just kind of wrapped up what I was going to share.
Okay.
Well, back to Willie's point, though, that kind of helps break that silo up a little bit, right? Because you're getting that cross pollination of end users, and I would love to see the groups where the to be able to join that tour as an integrator, and there'd have to be some rules about you're not there to sell. You're there to listen and learn, right? And hear what their struggles are, because we as, I come from the integration side, we kind of get siloed too of, hey, this works for this college, it should work for this other college. And it's, well, but they may be slightly different. Their clientele is different, their campus is different, their culture is different. And taking the time to learn that, and also be able to go answer those questions when one of your people called and said, hey, we're struggling with this, and you can go, I was just working with this other university, let me put you in contact with them, and you guys can talk together, and then let me know how I can help. That's a huge benefit, I think, for a lot of people. All right, topic number 2. That was good. That went really well. Topic number 2, and I'm sensing a theme here for this week, now that we're getting into this conversation. So this one comes from us, AVNation. It was an article about Legrand AV unleashing their elite experts. And they started this group back in 2020, which was, I don't know if everybody else feels like a decade ago at this point, but they have a solutions engineering team, and this is a group of experts that are, from all walks of life, and they are there to help you with your design questions and equipment questions when you're putting together your projects. And I know that as an integrator and a designer, we've always been able to call the manufacturers and say, hey, can you help me with your design? And there's some pros and cons that we could get into a little bit later. But the thing that really caught my attention is their comment that they're not just specifying their gear. They're truly there to help you, the person that's calling in for support, with your projects, and they will recommend other manufacturers, which is a huge thing, right? To be like, oh, well, this is not our best deal. And it makes me think of a movie. There was a movie where the guy became super famous for going, oh, well, you need to go with this person's stuff. Mine's not going to do what you do. But that adds some validity to your expertise, right? So I guess my question is this a big step from our traditional manufacturer helping you design, or is this just a small baby step in an offering from a large manufacturer?
I think it's a big step personally. And when I first read the story, I couldn't help but I'm laughing in support. I couldn't help but think about a children's organization where one of their principles is help me grow, and being an advocate for kids. So not that we're kids by any mean or pedestrian in our thinking, but when I think about the expertise that they're offering, clearly there is I wouldn't even say a niche market. There's a big market out there where we need that viewpoint. And I'll give you one example. Back on one of the projects I was overseeing and managing, integrating technology in a nursing environment in a medical school, right? So you're creating these clinical lab environments where students will go into individual labs. They can examine patients, whether those patients are live or really animated or automated mannequins. They were offered both. The faculty member could oversee that clinical exam via remote cameras. Everything's recorded. They can speak individually to the students or to the students as a whole. That was the whole concept. While I had perfect skill set to choose and integrate the hard codecs, the aspects of ceiling mounted cameras and microphones, there was a whole networking component to all of that that was well outside of my wheelhouse. And then there was a cloud storage component to all of that that was outside of my wheelhouse. And there was a security integration on the network outside of my wheelhouse. So I could attempt to task some of my colleagues on campus to help figure that puzzle out, or I could work with an organization like Legrand AV and have at my disposal a series of experts that I share the project. Here's my goal. Help me grow. Help me design this piece of infrastructure. Help me future-proof it. So 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 8 years from now, I'm not ripping and replacing all of that technology at an exorbitant cost because it's dated. So clearly, being able to reach out to an organization and not just talk to someone who represents sales, a vital part of what we do, but also someone who can speak from a design standpoint, from an end user support standpoint, from a whole integration picture from start to finish, as well as warranty and that support after the sale. So again, that whole aspect of help me grow just really permeated into my head in looking at that article.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of companies, become hybrid and start to offer services that support the hardware that they sell. Brian, I agree that I think the big step is that they're doing this to support hardware that they don't sell and open it up to other manufacturers. But one of the other things that really caught my attention coming at it from the manufacturers and from a sales organization perspective, I think it was the last paragraph they talked about, why are we doing this? And, of course, the first reason was it's a value add for our resellers. But the second part of that was to gain insight into the industry and the products that we support. So, I think in AV, most of us are selling products that are just a small part of the solution, especially for us, in the mounting space, it's an accessory or it's a complementary product. So we're supporting displays and video conferencing technologies and all kinds of other stuff, digital signage platforms. And it's hard to stay on top of all that. And, market research is very important, but a lot of times it gets pushed to the side. So it's almost like this initiative, it's very clever. It's going to on the job market research by being involved in these projects and all the different pieces that go together. So I found that interesting for sure.
Absolutely agree with that. And the word I was going to say was clever. Very, very clever.
Yeah.
And the first thing that came to my mind was the Apple Genius Bar.
Ah, good catch.
Mm-hmm. Whatever issue you've got, your phone's not working, you go into Apple and they solve it, whether it's actually an Apple issue or whether it's an end user issue, the loyalty that they have generated, Apple as a brand. And this is a very clever take on the Genius Bar, where whatever the issue is, they'll build a loyal following of people who will say, I know I'm going to go and get impartial advice here because it's such a soft sell. And anyone in sales wants to master the art of the soft sell. So I think it's a ridiculously clever move.
Well, you have to be careful that they're not overly steering stuff to their, you're impartial, right? And there can't be any favoritism or recommending this something that's not going to fit. But to what you just said, the Apple Bar, I was thinking, who does the expert ask? You know, who's the expert's expert? And that's something when, you know, when we're coaching new designers, there's this mentality of, oh, I need to know it all because I'm the designer, you know, I'm, and to Willie's point, you know, he was the go-to person on campus and it's like, well, I know a little bit of this and that and this, but putting it all together and having that person that you can call and say, let me run this by you. What are your thoughts? What are you seeing out there?
And it's refreshing when somebody says, I actually don't know what the solution is. I'm going to reach out to my network. It's really refreshing. So it's very clever. I think it's, very clever.
And they're definitely going to benefit, like you said, there's that soft sell, right? Because you're offering this. Well, of course, they're going to, like, well, you know, they help me out.
I don't want you to buy from me.
In Mid-Atlantic. And yeah, you don't have to buy from me. You probably should, but you don't have, you know. And that's because we're,
but you don't have to.
Because we're all getting worn down with being sold to all the time, right? And I think if they do this right, it's going to be an easy sell for their other services. So, which leads us into our next topic of adding services, right? CDW, which is a behemoth. I think it's got probably some of the biggest name recognition of anything in our industry because they're beyond our industry, really.
Yeah.
But there was an article in My Tech Decisions this week. CDW is acquiring consulting firm Locus Recruiting, and they specialize in information security, cloud computing, networking, and infrastructure, which are all things that you can purchase through CDW, right? So they have other services before this, and they're just building that catalog. And so I guess when I was reading this article, my thought, again, being an integrator is as our industry matures, consolidation is a natural function of maturity, right? You start the mom and pop shops start dropping off, and you start getting more consolidated. Is the future distributors are the consultants and integrators, or and I'm not saying completely like every integrator will get bought up by a distributor, but is this something, because the CDW is not the first distributor to start branching out from being the box house supplier to, oh, well, we can offer these other services, warranties, design expertise. So is this where we're going? I know it's kind of future predicting, Will, but what's your crystal ball say?
Yeah, I think so. You know, coming at it from the sales perspective, you know, there have been these studies that have shown that in this kind of current environment, mostly largely due to the internet, about 70% of the buying decision is done before someone even talks to a salesperson, because they can get so much information at their fingertips on the internet. So, you know, organizations really have to adapt and change their sales paradigm, and, you know, expertise and insight becomes more important to the sales process than ever. You know, those same studies also have shown that one of the instances where a customer is still very willing and anxious to talk to a salesperson is when the sale is perceived to be, you know, really complex, or it's new to them, or there's really big risks associated with it. So I think that's one of the topics that they hit in that news release or that article, is that, you know, they purchased Locus Consulting to help their customers navigate some of those really complex IT deployments. So it kind of fits right into that strategy. And you know, like you said, we're already seeing it in other places, and I think it'll continue to grow beyond this. It won't be the first. It's not the first, and it won't be the last for CDW. And then competitors will be doing the same for sure. I mean, touches back to the previous article with Legrand. It's very similar to what they're doing, and actually, you know, it's very similar things that we're doing as well. So,
be the expert first, and worry about, and the sale will help. It will come along naturally.
Yeah, be a problem solver, help them identify problems that they didn't know they had, and then be the person that positions solutions. Yep.
And I think again, it's another clever alliance because of understanding their customers' pain points. If they're having to go to a different supplier for one service, and then those two suppliers aren't talking to each other, well, if it's all under one roof, you're removing those pain points. You have one account manager who is actually going to deal with all of those issues for you. Again, it's a really clever And I agree with Will. We're seeing it. There've been some acquisitions over the last couple of years that are very much lending themselves to, both in the UK and in the US, to this kind of model of working.
And there's a lot of complexity in what we do, even talking to like when I talk to architects and architecture groups, one of the questions I get is you're low voltage, but what does that, there's so much that falls under that category. There's so much that falls under technology. Mm-hmm. And one of my favorite things at industry events is to ask people, what's your 10-second elevator thing, to explain what we do. And it's tough because it's so broad, but there are parts, depending on who you work for and the company, they're like, well, we do these parts, but not these parts. And then, oh, well, we do it all, And that's one of those struggles that as an industry we have. And so, of course, our clients and our end users struggle with, well, do I call you about this? Or is that not your thing and I only call you about that? And so having a CDW or the big distributors, the Legrands out there, to where it's like they're so broad. It's like, oh, yeah, just call us and we can funnel you down the path that you need.
And I see their alignment with CDW as kind of the back of the house performer, if you will. So they're not on stage. So you'll get that level of expertise, but it comes by way of that salesperson or that sales engineer. Technology is so ubiquitous everywhere, all the time, all around us, but we really don't know all the granular interconnected components, if you will. Getting systems to play together well, I think, has always been a challenge. Some things have uniformly connected and run seamlessly. Others require talking to seemingly 17 people to get one task done, because everybody has a little piece of the puzzle to get this component to handshake with that component. So I don't know or fully understand Locus's role with CDW, just reading the article. So it'll be interesting over time to see how they work. In my past interactions with CDW and their team have been absolutely wonderful. But there were times that there were deficits when you needed something that person you were talking with didn't have the expertise. And of course, we know none of us could be experts in everything. So having that base to go to, from a cloud standpoint, from a security standpoint, knowing the scope of the work that surrounds a lot of our projects, it's refreshing. But again, I'm waiting to see what that working environment looks like, that collaboration looks like. Back of the house performer, the person mixing on lighting, sound, the stage, the bubbles coming up, or front of the house, the person in sequence in high heels and spandex, putting on the show. Who knows? But it'll be interesting to see it.
Well, anytime there's an acquisition, that's kind of one of the tricky parts, right? Is to get them to fit into the existing organization, but not diminish, destroy, or harm the expertise that they were brought in to handle.
I wonder what it means for the smaller organizations or even the medium-sized organizations who are not acquired, and how that impacts the industry and the kind of choice we have, whether we're actually creating this much, much smaller pool. Because there has been a lot of acquisition in the last couple of years.
And that was actually one of my next questions.
Oh,
that was
sorry.
perfect. Is it's perfect, because it was one of the things that I was thinking of too. Is there's this consolidation, but there's a big risk there, right? Because the bigger the companies that are out there, you look at the most recent top 25 integrators. Those big ones out there, they're chasing big projects. But if you're a small community college in rural, Iowa or whatever, whether it's true or not, I think the impression is like, well, that's a big company. They're not going to want to deal with our little 3 classrooms a year projects. And so they either try and do it themselves and aren't happy, and so that's how do we fight that concern as an industry? And I don't think we're going to all become one monolithic company at least not in my lifetime. But
you needed to say that with a bit more force. Not in my lifetime.
I don't know how long I'm going to live. There's new stuff coming out every day. I can get new knee replacement surgeries out there. Who knows? Might get a whole new body.
But the other thing is the other side of that is there are some fantastic small companies out there who are really good at what they do, and they're not set out to be the CDWs, but they're very good at what they do, and there's a danger that we lose that expertise where they can't compete. And especially current climate, economically as well, they can't, or they just can't meet the requirements, and it would be a shame to lose that, I think.
Well, I think the smaller firms kind of do some of the riskier stuff sometimes, just because they have to, right? They don't have the CDW pocketbook to go, oh, well, we could just throw this product at it. You have to be a little bit more creative sometimes. I recently went to a community theater. And it was just in this small room. It was 3 people on stage, but because of that limitation, it was actually a better experience than having a full-blown set. And it was turn on the light. We're focusing on this side of the stage. Turn the light off. Now we're going to focus on this side of it. But it was very. You were in the play. There was no, very immersive. Thank you. And which is a different experience than going to a full-on Broadway play where there's lights and there's music and there's dancers everywhere. And they both have their value, right? But you kind of have to know what do I need? What am I looking for?
I guess the other issue there is if you're going to a big Broadway show that commands a ticket price, that you're paying however much for that ticket and you're expecting to see everything, and going to a local production in a small room, the ticket price is going to reflect that. Unfortunately, our smaller businesses are still having to pay. Sometimes they have to pay more for the products that they're, and the components that they're, and so the service isn't always, it doesn't mean just because they're small that they can, so that's the bit that I think has become harder for smaller organizations over the last few years. Is the buying power, because our components cost what they cost.
Yeah, and you bring up a valid point. When is bigger not better? When it negatively impacts those smaller organizations, or it becomes so large that it can't afford to fail, that there's so much in jeopardy. Volume discounting is a real thing, and when you're a small entity, that becomes a bit more challenging when you can't get that job squared away as quickly as you would like because you don't have that volume buying opportunity, or you don't have the opportunity to warehouse as much as you need to satisfy your customers, or even looking at the workforce. If you have to scale down that workforce and don't have the ability to scale it up to meet some of the demands, again, you're working with a bit of a deficit. Deficit doesn't necessarily mean negative. It just means maybe you're chasing it a little harder, but you get the job done just as solidly as the larger entity that's out there.
Possibly more solidly.
Yeah. And I think in the end, it really still boils down to that customer experience. Will you get that call back? Will you get increased sales? Will you get the value of word of mouth as a viable piece of your advertising and ultimately your revenue because of the quality of work that you bring forward, large or small?
And that always important return business. You might go with the big player the one time, but if the experience isn't what you expected or wanted, then you start shopping for someone that's a little bit more focused on you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, had that experience on my campus. It's not unusual, especially in today's climate, that you have security cameras in businesses, college campuses, certainly in banks and other aspects. And one of the companies that came in to integrate, they truly walked in with a lot of vibrato, boasting their size. We're the company. And while they had a huge market share, and to my knowledge still maintain that, it was because they walk in the door with such confidence that they felt they had no competitors. It just didn't land well. In other words, it had nothing to do with their product, had everything to do with their salesmanship, and it had everything to do with feeling as though we were not valued as a client. So the smaller shops were able to land that contract, do a very effective job for us. Did we pay a little bit more? Yes, we did, because again, their buying power, volume discount wasn't as high, but the service after the sale, the integration, the relationship that was formed is absolutely rock solid. So there's something to be said about understanding what the client needs versus the client understanding you're big and powerful.
Yeah, there's a balance there somewhere, right? Everybody wants to get bigger and grow, but the customers want to feel like they're a partner, a customer, not just an account number, and like where is that tipping point where you get so big that you can't have that sort of personalized feel to your service, basically.
And it's important for to Willie's point. Sometimes it's not just about the price, right? Because CDW is clearly going to get a bigger discount than someone buying from CDW and trying to compete against CDW.
Sure.
But there's that after the fact, they're 20 minutes away, their office is 20 minutes away from our campus. We know they can get here quickly. I work with a federal government client, and one of their complaints is always that because of their contracting rules and restrictions, a lot of their projects are done by out-of-state entities, and then it's they have to jump on 2 planes to get here. You guys are 20 minutes away, and we're like, yeah, we're 20 minutes away, but there's these hoops that have to be thrown through, and we get a lot of service work for that, and there's other avenues to do that, but there's value, right? When I was in sales, I would lose to one of those out-of-state people, and then they would call me up and say, hey, we won this contract, we want to sub through you. And it's like, you beat me. I can't do it for less than what you beat me for. So how are you making money by hiring me to go do the job you just won? But I've never claimed to be a brilliant business mind.
Well, you're here. That means you're successful.
Or available. Right? That's the term right now I keep hearing. The best ability is availability. So, I have that availability. Awesome. Well, thank you guys. This is a great conversation. I'm really impressed because when I read the 3 articles, they did not go together as well as our conversation did. It was it was really, for me, I'm like, this all links up together,
Well, yeah, if you think about it, HETMA are doing exactly the same thing.
Yep. Agreed.
Getting physical with AVIXA is exactly the same thing as the others are doing.
So what you're saying is when we work together, everything gets better.
Or does it?
There you go.
Well, if we're truly working together. It takes a team. It takes a village. I'm sure there's a proverb in there somewhere. How do people find you online?
So my Twitter handle, which is where most of the AV community see me, is Iffat. And often people call me Iffat as well. They think it's my name, but I respond to that. It's cool. But I'm also
it's good marketing if they think it's your name.
I'm also on LinkedIn, Iffat Chaudhry, and my podcast What If is on YouTube. The links are in my LinkedIn profile, so you can find me.
Which is a great name for a podcast.
Thank you.
What If? With your name and everything, I'm like, that is perfect.
Thank you.
That is brilliant. Willie, where do people find you?
I'm easy to find on LinkedIn, Willie Franklin, and via email at franklindjservices@gmail.com.
Awesome. And Will?
Yep, I am just on LinkedIn at William D as in David Bear.
And I was able to find all 3 of you today, so it's easy to do. Reach out. I thank you again for joining us this week, and have a great week, and we will see you next time.